The Western Balkans was not a major foreign policy priority for the UK government in the post-Brexit era, but it had the potential to be a place where an independent British foreign policy could be developed, especially given the positive legacies of British involvement in stopping the wars in Bosnia and Kosovo. After 14 years of the Conservative government, the UK's Labour rule might bring a reset in its foreign policy. Does that also mean carving its own path towards this region? Adam Amuno reports.
Look, the Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent.
That's how the UK's new Prime Minister Keir Starmer described the controversial Rwanda deportation plan to deport asylum seekers to the East African country. It was scheduled to start in August. Starmer's ditching of the plan is a far cry from moves by Italy to build 2 new detention centres to host migrants in Albania. These are expected to open in August. It wouldn't be the first time that there's been a policy difference between the UK and its Balkan ally over immigration. In 2022, Conservative lawmaker Suella Braverman sparked a diplomatic storm by suggesting that Albanian migrants crossing the English Channel constituted an invasion.
Instead of fueling a crazy narrative of invaders and gangsters to cover up for totally failed policies on borders and on crime, the British representatives need to come to Germany and learn quick and fix their own problems.
Fast forward to now, Starmer's Labour government has promised a shift in the country's approach to its foreign relations. But what could this mean for UK-Balkan relations, which stretch back centuries? The UK has been and will be expected to continue to help keep the peace in Kosovo, where its troops have been stationed as part of the KFOR peacekeeping mission. Britain increased the number of soldiers it sent from 400 to 600 after Serb gunmen killed an ethnic Albanian policeman and attacked pilgrims at a Serbian Orthodox monastery in the village of Banska in September last year. Labour's Foreign Secretary David Lammy has said progressive realism will drive the UK's foreign policy. The UK already has good economic and trade ties with Balkan countries and has been at the forefront of fostering human rights and democracy in the region. It's expected to continue doing this to compete with China and Russia's growing economic and military influence in the region. But without the UK's foothold in the EU, it remains to be seen how it can support the accession ambitions of its allies like Kosovo, Bosnia and Albania. As Starmer navigates the complexities of international diplomacy, his anticipated approach to the Balkans will continue to foster cooperation and good relations. However, just as Balkan countries desire a shift in the geopolitical scene and greater influence, the UK is also seeking to calm the troubled waters. Adam Amuno, Across the Balkans.
To better understand the UK-Balkan relations, I'm joined by Faris Koçan. He's an assistant professor and chair of international relations at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Ljubljana. Great to have you with us, Faris. Now, compared to previous administrations, how might a Labour government shift the UK's diplomatic approach towards the Balkan states?
I would say that both the Labour and Conservative parties in the UK have or share similar viewpoints, assumptions and approaches towards the role of the UK in the world. So in that respect, I would say that to a certain extent you could observe, or we could observe in the next few years, or at least 4 years, a relatively similar approach also towards the Western Balkans, particularly because the Western Balkans was never a region where the UK had a strategic interest in regards, or in parallel with other worldwide regions, because of course UK was not historically as present as other important states in Europe. So I would say that more or less it could be the same, or we could observe the similar trajectory, which would then manifest in the trajectories set in the years after the Brexit.
And what do you see as main issues in the Balkans that could be a point of interest for this new government in the UK?
I would say that they could, to a certain extent, more or less extend the approach that was visible in the past 2 or 3 years. So we have a special envoy for the Western Balkans. They see that they want to accelerate the region's green transition. They want to combat corruption. They have to boost prosperity. They also tend to employ more or less instruments also for the investment. So I would say that these are certain gabarits on which the UK government, whichever it would be, so in this sense, the Labour, or in other sense, so Conservatives might approach within the region. So they want to have to boost the investments. They have the UK export finance, so in that respect, they will probably also want to boost their exports in the region. They want to have guarantees for UK companies to trade overseas with confidence in this respect towards the region. And they also tend to employ some additional funding also for their infrastructure. So as it was, for example, the Morava Corridor motorway in Serbia, right? So these are of strategic interest, something that the UK will probably in the next years also pay attention to in the region.
And what about the ethnic tensions and the peace and stability of the region itself? In what ways could a Labour-led UK contribute to stability of the region?
I would say that this is also, to a certain extent, a post-Brexit phenomenon, because UK was, of course, and is still part of the so-called Quint in the region. UK was an important player within the EU foreign policy or EU enlargement policy before the Brexit, but they now have to find their own footing. So I would say that they are, to a certain extent, now less burdened with this idea of finding or balancing between the needs and reality and trying to achieve consensus on the EU level, so they can be, to a certain extent, principled. And this is something that we could also observe in House of Lords, for example, or their special envoy. They are very much committed to this. They don't have this legacy of also having a strong diaspora in the UK, so they could be, to a certain extent, more principled. And we could see that. So they are trying to achieve some big steps in terms of normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina. This is something that the Labour government should also take a look at, and most probably will. Another thing that they'll try to probably reassess is their rejoinment of Operation Althea. This is something that is really important also for House of Lords, and probably Labour is also more principled in that regard, or trying to upkeep even more this liberal world order. And of course, they will commit, because they are still committed. They have strong networks within the civil society sector in the region, and they will most probably continue with financing the reconciliation programs or paradigms within the civil society that tends to normalize or de-antagonize ethnic relations in the region. And another probably important aspect is going to be propaganda and media disinformation, which is acute also in terms of the war in Ukraine. They are talking about also financing potentially BBC Albania. So this is also something where probably the Labour Party or the Labour government is going to be active much more than other governments, which tended to, balance the paradigms and shifts within the liberal world order.
I want to ask you about David Lammy, specifically the UK's foreign secretary. He visited Kosovo back in 2023, just last year, a couple of months ago, emphasized this big support from the UK to Kosovo. We know the role that Tony Blair played in Kosovo as well. How significant is for Pristina then during these challenging times when it comes to its dispute with Serbia to have UK on its side?
It's really important, as we probably have to assess it as well. This post-Brexit phenomena is of crucial importance, because the EU foreign policy or the EU approach towards the region is not as principled as it should be. So the idea of normalization of relations is burdened by each or everyday situations in the region, and Britain has, to a certain extent, liberated itself from it. So they can be speaking with one voice, having one minister that has strong values, that has strong ideas and instruments for the region. So this is really important also for Pristina, because they can now rely upon a partner, which is, of course, not just a permanent member of the Security Council, but also a crucial member of the so-called Quint, to pressure official Belgrade to start with the normalization part of and eventual recognition of Kosovo.
Faris, what do you think, in your opinion, should be the UK's approach towards the Balkans? We haven't seen, as you mentioned, specific strategy. What do you think, let's say, was their main mistake in the past 14 years? And what do you think should change towards the region?
I would say that they, because of the historical developments or the idea of where the UK should be present in terms of the world regions, they too much relied upon the ideas that derived from Germany, from Austria, from France, and from other EU member states. So they were important in that regard because of their status in the world, but they didn't have their own ideas how to approach it. You could observe all the statistical data and things like that. So they were rather irrelevant player also when it comes to trade, also when it comes to soft power mechanisms, which is, of course, rather surprising due to the fact that, they speak English. A lot of this is second language in the region. So they have missed several opportunities. Where they were strong was in terms of the civil society actors or the role of this ambassadors and this phenomena. So I would say that they should, because they're now liberated from the idea of having to reach a consensus or balancing what the Belgrade is saying and doing and what Pristina is saying and doing and other policy actors, that they can have their own principled foreign policy. And you could see that. So, for example, when other players shy away, they pose sanctions. They don't shy away from sanctions. They have sanctions also posed to Republika Srpska officials. So this is something that is of crucial importance, and Britain should continue with this. So the principled foreign policy based on liberal values, liberal world order, and financing programs, financing projects be within these multilateral platforms where you have to determine what is going to be worldview amidst the fact that we have war in Ukraine. And of course, UK is now also focused on Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is talking more openly and, more vibrantly in terms of the sovereignty, the idea of territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is important amidst the fact that we have a seriously bad situation now coming into the EU, where you could see fractions and tensions also between member states on how to react upon secessionist policies and nationalistic rhetoric. So here is where Britain should leave its mark in the region.
Faris Kocan, great to have you with us. Hope to have you again on the show some time later. Thank you. That's it for this week from us here on Across the Balkans. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.